Hello, this is Gregory Becker, and this is the first of 3 courses on an introduction to project risk management. This first course is developing the risk management plan. In the following modules, we're going to look at how we identify risks and how we use experience and judgment to quantify those risks and develop a plan. So let's get going.
What is risk? We're going to use an interesting recent project to illustrate some of the concepts in this course, the Panama Canal. In the early 2000s, the Panama Canal and its authority, the Panama Canal Authority, needed to expand the capacity of the canal system. The canal had been designed in the early 1900s. It was commissioned in 1915. And at the time it was commissioned, it had been designed to pass the largest warships then in the American Navy inventory. But now, 100 years later, the canal has passed to the ownership and to the operation of the government of Panama. And the principal customers are no longer American warships, but they are bulk carriers, they are container ships, they're cruise ships, they are oil and gas ships. There are other commercial ships which have grown much, much larger over the ensuing years. The canal can no longer handle those much larger ships. And so a project was set upon to build a third set of locks. The original canal had 2 sets of parallel locks, again, built in the early 1900s. And the project was to build a new set of locks to the southwest in the picture. And those locks would be able to handle these much, much larger commercial ships. The scope of the project, as it was originally planned, was to be about $5 billion, a little bit more, and to have a schedule of about 7 years. The schedule is really important. Why? The schedule is really important because the canal generates a lot of revenues. It generates, before the expansion, it was generating about $4 billion a year-ish, and afterwards maybe more like 6-ish, and with a very, very large profit margin. And the margin of those revenues goes to the government of Panama. So it's a very serious source of revenues. And so any slippage in the schedule would mean slippage in future revenues. There were major technical hurdles, as in any mega project. One was the control of freshwater quantities. The inland waters in Lake Gatun and in the inland canals and waterways of Panama are all fresh water. That water comes as runoff from precipitation in the highlands of Panama. One thinks of Panama as a water-rich country, which it is, but the canal also is a huge consumer of water. Every time a ship passes through one of the locks, fresh water passes with it. And there's, especially in drought years, a limit to how much fresh water is available. There were also issues of potential salination. The inland waters of Panama are all fresh waters. They support a rich and old ecology. There is even a large Smithsonian research laboratory on one of the major islands in Lake Gatun. It's a valued national, international heritage site. As the ships pass in and out of the locks, they may or may not carry salt water with them, so that was an issue. Perhaps the biggest technical hurdles of all, and one which created one of the largest risk items, was natural hazards. When the canal was originally conceived in the early 1900s, one of the reasons for choosing Panama as its venue was that Panama was thought to be immune from natural hazards. Hurricanes, while there's a lot of hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, for geographic reasons, they don't hit Panama. And it was thought that Panama didn't have earthquakes or volcanoes. It's still thought that it doesn't have volcanoes, but in the intermediate years, it's been discovered that earthquakes are actually a relatively large hazard. So this was another technical hurdle.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying this free lesson from the University of Maryland's Project Management Center for Excellence. If you want to check out more lessons just like this one, click the link in the description below where you'll be able to go to our website on executive project management. There, you can find edX courses, professional short courses where you can learn from an instructor like me, as well as request custom team training for you and your organization. All right, let's get back to the lesson, and I'll see you at the end.
Well, as a project manager, we look at a project from this concept of the famous iron triangle: cost, schedule, and scope, right? The first axis is cost. The cost was estimated to be $5.25 billion. How was that estimated? Well, we look at historical costs. We look at the material costs, the quantities of materials, the cost of labor, the cost of finance. We put them all together in a spreadsheet, in a big, a budget estimate, and we add them all up. We multiply the quantities times the unit costs. We add the other costs together, and we get a final estimate. But all these components are all only estimates. They're all a little bit uncertain. The good news is that a budget is a relatively simple mathematical structure. We just add things up, basically. And so the uncertainties aggregate. The uncertainties become larger as you add them all together, but they also average out, right? I mean, if the uncertainties in the various cost components are independent of one another, some costs might turn out to be higher than we thought, but others might turn out to be lower. And so those two balance out. And so we typically get relatively well-formed estimates with modest amounts of uncertainty. And as we will see throughout this course, we can use probability models to help us understand those costs. The second axis of the iron triangle is schedule. And just like costs, activity durations are only estimates. We don't know them exactly. And unlike costs, our historical data on durations tend to be more limited. We have some information, but not as much as we have information about cost. Furthermore, this is a bigger problem. Uncertainties in schedule don't aggregate in simple spreadsheets where we add them all up. They come together in schedule networks. And those networks have parallel paths, they have series paths, they have critical paths, that's the longest path. They have technologically critical paths. That may not be the longest path, but it might be the path with the most uncertainty about whether you can actually achieve the schedule. So the mathematics of schedule estimates are more complex, much more complex, and much more malicious sometimes than for cost estimates. But again, we have probabilities to understand schedule uncertainties, and we will explore those in some detail as this course goes on. The third axis of the iron triangle is scope and quality. More difficult. Scope is performance against requirements. That's pretty straightforward. The project has a set of deliverables and requirements, and our scope is to make sure that we deliver those in adequate quality. But quality, while important, is also often very hard to measure. Important, but hard to measure. And I point out that change of scope as a project goes on is often a major project risk. A change of scope means potentially increased costs, longer schedules, delays, and often difficult to anticipate. So how did the Panama expansion, the third set of locks project, do? It's a mega project. It's one of those large projects in the world in the year it was built. It was originally estimated to be about $5 billion. It came in at $8 billion, which is about 60% more than anticipated. So maybe not as good as it could have been. Equally importantly, it took about 11 years to complete, whereas the original estimate was 7. So it took about 4 more years to complete. And given the increased revenues in the canal anticipated to be between $1 and $2 billion a year, that's between $4 and $8 billion of lost revenues. We're going to, over the next many weeks, we're going to talk about how we can rationally grapple with some of these uncertainties, these risks in projects. And we normally try to characterize those risks with 2 metrics. The probability that something go wrong. So we'll create a table, which we call a risk register, of the things that can go wrong in a project, and we'll associate each of those things with some estimate of our own of the probability, the chance that it'll happen. And the other aspect is, if it does happen, what's it going to cost, right? What's the consequence? That cost might be financial, it might be environmental, it might be health and safety, it could be many things. But if something goes wrong, what are the consequences? And we will combine those two things in what project managers think of as risk, which is the expectation of cost, the product, the probabilities times cost. So this product, probability times cost, is how we will define risk.
Hey there, did you enjoy that lesson as much as I did? If you did, go ahead and give us a like. If you want to see another one, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, put them below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Moreover, is there somebody in your life who really needs this lesson right now? If so, go ahead and share it with them. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. Now, we look forward to seeing you in the next lesson where you can learn even more from the University of Maryland Project Management Center for Excellence. Thanks so much.